Thanks, Ian, and a huge thank you to everybody for being here today, and particularly to Ian and for Lynn for inviting me to today's session. The Richard bit is because, unfortunately, when I stood for election, my election agent put my form in as Richard, so the council keep telling me they have to call me Richard, but all my friends call me Ricky, and some of my enemies call me that as well. So it's quite an unusual experience, this, doing a sort of debate thing where nobody can actually interrupt me or heckle me, so that's quite interesting. And it's also really a real privilege for me to be here today, because I have been the City Treasurer now for 7 weeks, and this is the first forum that I've addressed out with the council since taking on that position. So hopefully you will bear with me and accept that I may not know all the answers to questions that come up later on, but I certainly should be able to find them. It's also, if you see my face turning blue, it's because I've put a work shirt on today for the first time in 7 weeks, and given that I've added a few pounds during this lockdown period, it means that I'm slightly struggling to breathe. But back to the serious stuff. I mean, I think it's been, I have always, ever since I became a councillor about 3 years ago, I've always thought the City Treasurer would be a great role to do, because you have some control and influence in terms of how the council spends its money, but also to be able to add political direction to where that money goes, rather than just bean counting. And I couldn't have imagined that when I took it over, it would be at a time like this and we would face the unprecedented issues that are going on. So in terms of how the council sees things moving forward, I think the most important thing for us is, and I think you touched on this in your introduction remarks, Ian, is that the most important thing for us is that we can't go back to business as usual, because this city was not good enough before COVID-19 arrived, and certainly what's happening now is going to make it a lot more difficult for all of us. And I think from the council's perspective, we would want to say a huge, huge thank you to you guys for all of the work that you've done. I don't think, in fact, I know that we couldn't have been able to provide the level of support and resource throughout COVID-19 if it wasn't for the help and support that we've had from the third sector, and it has been absolutely amazing. And even just in my own ward, I'm the local councillor for Govan, as well as being the City Treasurer, and with just in the things I've seen happen on the ground in Govan, and I volunteer with some of the folks from the Kinnan Park complex doing food deliveries with them, and it's just been absolutely amazing, the stuff that's going on. And I think Susan Aitken said when she addressed you a couple of weeks ago that we probably, as a council, while we understood that there was a huge amount of poverty in the city and real families facing challenges, I'm not sure that we all appreciated just how fragile some parts of the city were, and I think COVID-19 has brought that to the fore for all of us. And it's also something that we, I think, I don't want to be party political about this, but I think the First Minister has now made it acceptable for politicians to say, we don't know all the answers, and we don't know all the answers, and we are not going to be able to get Glasgow back out of this situation without the help and support of organisations like yourself. And Susan has touched on at her address to you last week about the Economic Recovery Group. One of the things that Councillor Layden, who I think spoke to you as well, and myself are going to want to do is we're going to set up a social recovery group to advise on ideas and thinking. And there will be no limits to what that group will consider. So we're asking everybody to come up with the best ideas you possibly can, and be as radical as you want to be and as challenging as you want to be, because this is the time that we have to think very differently. This has to be about changing the economy, not just within Glasgow, within the whole country, but our role and thing is about changing the economy within Glasgow, and we have to be able to do that. And it has to be, and as some of the stuff you touched on earlier, and it has to be about inclusive, and it has to be sustainable, and it has to be, we have to rethink our economic recovery and to make sure that that works for all of the citizens in Glasgow. And we have to rethink unemployment support, because unemployment is going to transform in this city, because we are going to see huge numbers of people unfortunately become unemployed as a result of this. While I have welcomed the Rishi Sunak's furlough scheme for employees, there is no doubt that that is hiding the fact that there is unemployment, and some of those people who are currently furloughed will not have jobs to go back to, because those businesses will not be able to be stood back up again, and that's a real challenge for all of us in the city. So I think there's an opportunity for us to rethink economic recovery, and I think from a council's perspective, we would support the UBI and as a key policy to providing a social security net for all, and be really interested to hear what Jamie's got to say on that later on. And also, you know, the council's involved in a pilot project, as you'll probably know, and some of that's starting to come forward. So we need to think about how we go with that. And I think most of you will probably seen that I've one of the first things I did in the role was to write to the UK Chancellor outlining key asks, you know, one of which was to stop sanctions. I've asked them to stop the 5-week wait on universal credit. We've asked them to abandon the 2-child limit and also the rate clause, to end benefit caps, and to abandon no recourse to public funds. Now, I also had said in the letter to him that, you know, he had to continue with the furlough scheme, and I'm absolutely delighted that he has announced that they're going to do that, at least for July. I think we have to wait and see what the detail is for the rest of the timescale that he's announced in terms of what he's expecting of employer contributions, because clearly, while the return to work messages are slightly different in Scotland and in England, the Chancellor pulls that back too much, then it's going to be very difficult to say to people, you've got to stay at home and not go to work while they're not getting any pay. And so there are real challenges there for us. But in terms of the social recovery group, I'd like to talk, you know, so as I said, myself and Councillor Layden, who's the Equalities Convener, are going to set up this social recovery task force, and one that will replicate and intersect with the work of the Economic Recovery Group. So just as we have the Economic Recovery Group, Glasgow's got strong networks, relationships and partnerships within the third sector, equalities groups as well. And so we want to quickly mobilise thinking and the response needed to support the citizens throughout the crisis. And it needs to be a genuine team response. I think, you know, one that the council will help resource and bring together, but it has to be a collective role. It has to be everybody. You know, the days of the council being able to say to people, this is how to do it, and let's just get on with it, are finished. You know, we have to work collaboratively with all of the partners that are out there, because apart from anything else, the council now has, you know, we already had a big issue in terms of our resource. And, you know, since I've taken over as the city treasurer 7 weeks ago, all I get is emails saying, oh, that's got worse, and that's got worse, and that's got worse. So there's a real challenge there, and the council can't do it all. So we have to have a genuine team. Now, I see somebody popped up in the question there, who will be on this task force? And that's a question I want to ask you, is, you know, who should be involved in this social group? The group will have to grapple with some fundamental questions, most of which are where we're trying to imagine what this new world will be. How do we ensure that we take the opportunity to reimagine our services and to provide the support for those that will need it? So what will this new normal look like? What will work look like? You know, what will communications and what will communities look like? And I think that's the big challenge that all of us are certainly going to face as we go forward. And so one of the questions I want to ask from you guys is, you know, who are the people that we should have around the table? How do we support people, and how do we build the confidence? Because one of the big fears I have is not just that, you know, the position is that it's easy enough, or not easy enough, but the government will at some stage say it's fine for people to go back out, and it's fine for people to go back to work, and it's fine for people to start slowly and gradually building your life again. But how do we give people the confidence to be able to do that? You know, there are people who haven't set foot over their doorstep in 7 weeks, and it will be a lot longer than that probably before they're able to do. But once they are able to do that, how do we give people the confidence to be able to do it? How do we give confidence to businesses to reopen again if they are going to struggle to get people to come and buy their services in some of the a big part of our economy in Glasgow has always been built around the leisure industries, and how do we re-engage with them, and how do we give them the confidence, and how do we ensure that if the recession is as bad as the early indications suggest, that our communities are not left behind. I think that's hugely important, that this isn't just about an economic recovery. It's about how we change the way that the economy works for all of the people of Glasgow. And so where do we focus resource? Resource is clearly going to be limited for all of us. And one of the key questions then is, where do you focus that resource, and what role for community planning partners will there be in this new sort of new world as well? And then also, how can the public and the third and voluntary sectors work closer together, and what learning can we all take from this? Because there are huge things going on in the ground just now that I think one of the things for us as a city council has been, I don't think anybody would be hugely surprised if I say that Glasgow City Council has a very risk-averse approach to most things. But this COVID-19 has caused that to have to be put to one side, and our officers have been absolutely fantastic in the work that they've done and been able to deliver across this pandemic. But how do we make sure that that remains the sort of working ethos that we work towards, that we don't get ourselves wrapped up in bureaucracy and red tape and a sort of difficult to be able to get decisions made culture? So we have to move forward with that as well. And how do we work across agencies which are doing the same things successfully just now? How do we work with them in the future? And I think the key question that I think is really important for all of us, and this has been one that we're working on in the council just now, is how do we get money into people's pockets? How do we actually get money direct to people that makes a real difference to their lives? And I know obviously the UBI is part of the solution to that, but in terms of some of the other things we have to look at is how do we get that money to, and so one of the discussions we've been having is with the Scottish Government about where they've were about to launch their new policy in terms of giving payments to families with children, which has been put on hold. But how do we get those types of things back up and running really quickly so that there is actually money going into the people who actually require it? As I said earlier on, I think it's fair to say that some of the council wasn't aware of how fragile. Now, I represent the Govan ward, so there is no doubt to me how fragile the situation is with a lot of families that are, a lot of our citizens are living lives that are not ideal. And this is, we can't over-promise either, is I think the other thing. We have to be careful that we don't say to people, this is going to be a magic solution to everything. We have to make sure that we are able to provide families with what they require as much as we possibly can. And how do we look at how we can do things, as I said earlier, differently in order that we're able to try and make sure that we take families with us. Poverty has always been a challenge for this city. It's always been one that we've had to look at and had to work with. But I think, as I said earlier, there is no doubt in my mind and in the City Council's mind that this COVID-19 is going to make the poverty situation for us significantly worse. And we have to work together across the city to make sure that we are able to help as many families as we possibly can, and to make sure that in this climate that nobody's left behind when we start building the new Glasgow and the new recovered Glasgow. And so I think that's really the kind of main message I want to give you today from the City Council, is about this new partnership that we want to build, and about our commitment to saying we can't go back to where we were different.